Hey, good afternoon. Before we begin, a reminder, we will be using the same Zoom link all day. If you need to sign up for any reason, just use the same link from your email and you'll be right back in. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, drop us a line in the chat or by email at events@esln.org. If you have questions for the presenters, please submit them to the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. All attendees are expected to follow the Pillars Code of Conduct, which will be added to the chat shortly. To summarize, please treat all staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. Those who are not adhering to the Code of Conduct will be removed from the webinar. Now please enjoy our next session, Practical AI, Lesson from the Academic Librarian's Journey.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denice Lewis, and I'll be presenting on Practical AI, Lessons from an Academic Library's Journey. So for this afternoon, I'll do a brief introduction of myself, if you haven't heard me speak before, touch on my AI journey, and then literally go through how I use AI for research, as well as for instruction. So, who is Denise? I actually have a background. I have a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering, and I actually worked in industry for a little bit before going back to school for culinary arts, and then working in academia, and then going back working in industry, and then getting my MLIS. But I mainly have worked in software development and testing, as well as a chef, and an adjunct instructor for math and a librarian now. So I've been here at Wake since March of 2019. And here are just a few places where I worked. I realized that I worked in corporate America and academia, but I haven't worked in nonprofit. That's the only area that I've sort of kind of stayed away from, and the government as well. But in terms of how I got started with AI, I actually been using AI for a little bit. I forgot that I had been using Dimensions AI, but the first email that I got was from Josh Nicholson, who's one of the co-founders from Site, back in October of 2021. One of those things that you get as an academic librarian is emails from vendors saying, hey, use my tool. But I didn't actually get an opportunity to use Site until there was a PhD student whose faculty member gave them an article on continued gravitational contraction, that was published back in 1939, and literally asked the student to find all of the articles that cited that particular article. Not knowing how it be used, I put together a table of different databases, apps, and the citation count at that point in time, and different ways that he could pull the information. After meeting with him, he decided to use Cite. And one of the reasons that he gave for using Cite was the fact that not only did it show the articles that cited on continued gravitational contraction, but it also included a snippet showing how those authors cited, what did they say. So it literally included like a couple sentences before and after the actual citation within the article. And I found out since then that the physics department does a lot of citation chaining. I was like, okay, now I know it's okay. It's all right. But in terms of how I've been using AI since then, before I start that, I do want to, I try to, I'll touch on this real quick. Whenever I'm using generative AI, one of the things that I always think about is where's the information coming from? So like initially when ChatGPT came out in November 22. It was a large language model. And there are other chatbots, current terminology, that utilize the large language model. But now ChatGPT can search the web, and Mistral Chat can search the web as well. And then there are the chatbots that are generative AI that actually web scrape in the sense that they go out on the web and pull information from different websites. So Gemini, when it first was developed, was doing that, and Perplexity.ai, even though it morphs and change, I feel like almost every couple of weeks or month. That's been one of its big plugs, is that it's actually able to web scrape. And I have asterisks by Perplexity because it has different focuses that you can pull information from. And then there's those AI tools that pull from a corpus. So like Perplexity can pull from Semantic Scholar, and Site.ai, they actually have agreements with different journals and publishers to be able to analyze the full text of articles as they're ingested in the tool. Yeah, and that's the most recent screen capture of Perplexity. Now it seems to search SEC filings. We'll talk about that later. But as someone who supports research here at Wake, as well as conduct my own research, there have been a variety of different ways that I've used AI over these last 4+ years. So whenever there's terminology that I'm unfamiliar with, given that my degree was in electrical engineering, and that was a lot, we're not going to say how many. I actually like to use Site.ai's assistant. Because Site's assistant works very similar to most chatbots in the sense that you can give it a prompt and it'll answer. But the difference is it's pulling information from articles, preprints, some book chapters, books that Site's ingested and analyzed. And it'll give you those inline citations. So I like to use it as a general overview in terms of a knowledge center. Given that Site doesn't have every single article, book that has been published around the world. But I've also used other generative AI tools. There's literally 6 that I'll switch between. It really isn't a one-stop shop for me when people ask, well, what one tool would you suggest using? I'm like, there is. Because I use different tools just depending on what the need actually is. And I've noticed that some of the chatbots, the actual results will vary depending on the field that you're actually looking in. So it just really depends. I haven't necessarily used generative AI for a research question, but I have used it to fine tune a research question. But I've looked at, if you use the prompt, what are the gaps in blank, or suggest some research questions in regards to a particular field, you'll get a response back. Like in this particular case, I just asked Site.ai's assistant, what are the gaps in dielectrophoresis, cell separation research. And then I also like using elicit.com. Elicit.com used to be elicit.org and free, but now it has both a free and paid version. So when I was writing a book chapter about AI in academic libraries, I actually used Elicit because how it actually works is it'll take a research question and then return a list of articles. In the past 3 to, actually it's been a little bit longer, 6 months, Elicit is trying to morph into more of a systematic review tool. So it actually creates a report now, not only answering whatever research question they propose, giving you a list of articles, but also will generate a report with a synopsis, tables, all that kind of stuff. But if I haven't necessarily needed to use AI in developing a search string, but I did use AI to tweak the search string that we're using for a systematic review. So for this particular screen, I'm actually using a prompt that I was playing with just to generate a search string for a particular topic that one of the engineering students was working with and needed assistance with. But I found that you can actually prompt generative AI chatbots, ask it to develop even a search strategy. So you could say, this is my topic. What databases would you recommend that I use? And could you also create a search string for me to use on each database? So in this particular case, I just said I'm researching transaortic transcatheter. These are databases that I'm using. You can give me some search strings. And this is a quick screen capture of all the search strings that each of the chatbots provided. These are the ones I use most often. So Perplexity, I love the fact that it web crawls and can pull, and also will show you the source, so you can go back and view the source. Gemini, Les Mistral Chat is from France, Grok, Claude, and ChatGPT. Grok is really quick, but the only thing with Grok is that it doesn't have a history. So only use it when I want it, quick snippets that it doesn't really matter if I can go back to it or not. And you can see that the results varied in every single case. So I like using at least 3 or 4 just to really see what each one is saying, because all the time they'll have different results. Um, And this is just a real quick screen capture. I tested to see each of the search strings that were provided, what the results were in Web of Science, and you can see the results varied widely. So like Grok had the most results with a very simple search string, 1017, and Les Mistral Chat had the least number of results with a more detailed search string at 45. So that's why I like playing with different ones to see what they'll give me. And this is just using Sites.ai's assistant. I've played with using a variety of different prompts. So just to see what will it give me. And it did give a pretty good search string. Although I don't know if I'd add, well, I could. The outcomes or complications, the 4th category that it uses. So if you need help finding relevant resources, now this is where I don't use generative AI to find sources for the most part. If I'm doing a real detailed, if I'm diving in and doing in-depth research, um, that's when I'll move to using Cite, just the regular tool, not the assistant. And then because I can change the search mode from citation statements to now it's metadata. It used to be papers. Talk about how often AI tools change in a while. But it's a really good way to get a sense of, I've noticed that with Cite, in terms of the papers that it returns, the relevancy is increased. Also, if you're looking at the search results, the citation statements, that's where you can, if you're trying to look at specific keywords or a new terminology for a field and see how people are referring to it. When you're looking at the citation statements, that's where Cite is pulling snippets from the actual full text of the articles. But that can be a way that you can see how a particular term has evolved in the scholarly communication, actually seeing how people have referenced it. Google Ngram is another tool that I use just to see how the usage of terminology, how it's changed over time, considering the fact that certain words that we use today in 2025, if there was a particular field of research that goes on for decades, may not necessarily be the same terminology that was used, say, in the 1950s, 1980s even, or even early 2000s. So it's really helpful to see terminology and how people are using it or what they're saying about a particular topic. Now, Elicit also is a really good tool to use to find papers. It's more relevant in the sense that it'll give you those first handful of papers that you start with. I look at them as more like seed papers where you can just give it a research question. Although I did teach a course, developed and taught integrating AI into the research process here in Wake this past spring. There were a couple of students that used a search string rather than a research question, and Elicit still, gave results. So yeah, even though Elicit was made for individuals to input a search string, research question, you can use a search string if you want to and elicit. Now, insightful.xyz is an extremely powerful tool. I love it because it uses um, a combination of different algorithms with the citations of papers to recommend similar papers. And all you need is a single article. So in those times where I'm not finding what I need, or I'm only finding 1 or 2 or 3 articles on a particular topic, that's where I'll use Insightful and just use one of the articles because Insightful will give you like 100 similar articles, 100 relevant articles. It'll also give you 100 top authors, relevant authors, institutions, even give you a list of journals for that particular topic. So if you needed help with where to publish, which I will probably need in a few months because there's a paper that I'm writing with some other librarians here in the Triad area. But literally one-stop shop. And you can even add other keywords in the keywords field under paper filters to fine tune even those results more. Oh, I went back. We're going forward. Doop, doop. So for that literature review, I like using Research Rabbit. Research Rabbit is a tool where all you need is a handful of articles and it'll give you similar articles to the articles that you add to a collection. You'll even list early work or later work. So it's a really quick way to go through and identify possible papers that you may want to read on a particular topic. And one of the things I love to do is even combining multiple AI tools to get a list of results. So there are times I'll either, when I was using the pro version of Elicit, it allows you to export the articles that it finds as a BibTeX file, if I'm not mistaken. But now I use Cite because we no longer have access to the promotion list. I'll cry later, but no. But with Cite, using Cite Assistant, you can ask a research question and then export the list of references as a BibTeX file, and then import those same references in a collection in Research Rabbit to really fine tune and get more relevant results for your topic. Because you know how you can use keywords and not all keywords translate where an author may be using the same words in an article that you really want to read. Potato. But that's where, having those pinpointed, more relevant articles helps with identifying additional articles with Research Rabbit in a really quick fashion. So if you think typing in a research question, a matter of seconds, getting the results, exporting results, a couple of minutes, importing them into Research Rabbit, again, a couple of minutes. Literally less than 5 minutes, you have a long list of results that you can look through and add, and then decide how you're going to get them in order to read them. So it just makes the process of finding relevant research quicker. In terms of analyzing data, I've used chatbots, generative AI, to analyze data. Like there was a physics professor who's an editor for a particular journal, and he wanted to find have a list of authors that cited papers from that same journal. Actually able to export the results, get all the articles from the journal from lens.org, export them and import them in ChatGPT. And he was able to do a network analysis to get those list of authors. I myself used Claude.ai. There's some research that I did with some other librarians. We did a survey of academic libraries just to look at their perceptions of AI from their institution's perspective, their library, as well as their own. And in order to code the quantitative results, I use Claude to get a sense of possible codes to use. Although the caveat there was what you don't see in the screen capture is, it gave really good possible codes to use for the data. But when I asked it further questions, like, how many would fit in each category, I noticed that the number was different from the number of rows that I imported in the CSV file. So the thing that you want to realize is that one of the caveats that I give for using um, any AI tool that is not their specific purpose is that you always want to check the results. Um, Even though they continually improve over time, the results are never going to be, I won't say never, but a lot of times, if you're using a tool in a way that it's not intended, the results are not going to be perfect. Um, but again, you can still use it just to get that idea, but then just go through and write your own codes. That'll be okay. But use it as a start. Um, and then outlining a research paper, if you write a lot, you can actually prompt for an outline. I love using Mapify because it's more visual in the form of um, a concept map. So a lot of times I'll use it just when I'm starting to develop ideas of what I want to write. I'll give it my topic and it'll basically just give me snippets or outlines. Um, and then also, this is a good use for generative AI. If you want outlines, you can literally ask, I'm creating a paper on XYZ, can you give me an outline? And each of the tools will actually present the outline in a different fashion. Um, and I keep going backwards when I want to go forwards. Hold on. So now, when I did this experiment, before just prompting for an outline, Gemini and Claude gave the best results, whereas the others outline a research study. But one of the things that you always want to do, if there are things that you're trying, you literally want to test it with different tools because, as I mentioned before, the tools always improve. They are always being, adding functionality, improving existing functionality. So definitely, have a list of cases that you use AI for that you can test those tools periodically to see how they've changed. Because they're tools that I used to use when I first started using AI heavily in 2022 that I no longer use now. So that's not a comprehensive list even of all the AI tools I use for research now, but I did want to just give you an overview of some different ways that you can use AI for. Now, as an instructor, before I get there, buyer beware, always whenever you're uploading information, especially data, make sure that it is anonymized where you're not sharing any sensitive or confidential information. I have the link to Samsung when they were uploading top secret code into ChatGPT. And then Gregory Hinton, just always remember, he left Google in order to talk about some of the dangers of using AI. One of the recommendations I always make, rather than creating an account with an AI tool using um, Google or Facebook or your Apple ID, I recommend just to go ahead and log in using an email address just to keep things separate. Um, but if you ever find yourself that you're using an AI tool and that AI tool moves from free to paid and you need to find a different AI tool, there are ways that you can find comparative tools to use. You can use the Google search related and then the URL for the AI tool. You can even Google alternative ChatGPT or even use like perplexity.ai for and ask, is there an alternative to blah, blah, blah. And there are even websites that have a list of different AI tools as well. So now I forgot to say, I'm a research and instruction librarian here at Wake Forest. So part of my job is to assist students and researchers as well as faculty with their research and to do my own. But another part of my job is actually doing one-shots where I go in the classroom to teach students um, a variety of different things, just all depends on what project they're doing in that particular class. And then I also develop and teach classes credit-based classes here at Wake Forest. So I use chatbots a lot for ideation, for brainstorming. So in that case, prompting matters. Um, so there are a host of different prompt strategies, for lack of a better word. So definitely just make sure that your prompt includes all the relevant information for what you're looking to get out of it. And I always date this because, again, the tools are evolving and changing on a continuous basis. So it's a matter of, I've even started in some cases adding the date that I've taken certain screen captures, because the actual graphical user interface, the interface actually changes as well. So Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Satdice AI's assistant, Les Mistral, Chat, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, all of these can be used for ideation as an instructor. The only reason I don't include Grok or suggest Grok is that it doesn't have a history of past chats. So just to talk about some different prompts that I've used. This is a real, before I get there, this is a really good resource for a lot of different prompts that you can use as a course creator. So I did want to include that as a reference. But I've played around with using chatbots for developing a course schedule. So in this case, I use Claude. I'm not going to read that whole prompt that I use, but this is a case where I gave it a frame where I told it, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to do. This is the title of the course. This is what the course is supposed to do. These are the topics, number of classes, each class is X. What would you suggest? So I did this with all of the different chatbots that I've mentioned before, just to get a sense. And Claude is actually pretty good. Did I use this particular course structure? No. But it gave me some thoughts of some things that I could include. Even creating learning objectives. In this particular case, I used Perplexity back in November. And this is when it had a writing focus. I gave it the URL for the ALA framework and then said, basically asked, what learning objectives should I consider for my course, integrating AI in the research process. So, and Perplexity was pretty good in terms of giving some ideas for learning objectives that I could look at. And then ChatGPT still maintains a lead over Claude in terms of creating rubrics. I've even played with ChatGPT in terms of, we use Canvas here at Wake Forest, and you can import a rubric into Canvas, but you have to use a specific template. So I've downloaded the template from Canvas, uploaded it to ChatGPT, and asked it to create a rubric in that particular style. And it was actually able to do that. So if rubrics aren't your thing, that's where you can use generative AI to help and assist in that area. Even with the syllabus, creating a syllabus, Claude has the edge in creating a syllabus. Because it actually included, participation expectations, late work policy, academic integrity. That's not necessarily how my course ended up being, but it's good for brainstorming, giving some different ideas of things to consider. For instance, my late work policy was pre-work could not be turned in late. Homework could be turned in late 5 days after the deadline with a 20% penalty per day. And their students couldn't, there was also the other assignment that can be turned in late was their final presentation and their final presentation. So I've actually played around with using AI with developing assessments in a variety of different ways. So one of the things in my class is, or one of the things we have here at Wake is the Center for the Advancement of Teaching has a Course Design Institute. And this is one of the prompts that I used from them using Gemini, looking at formative and summative assessments. Because one of the things that I'm looking at doing is revising a face-to-face course for an online 5-week summer course that I've developed before. And in this case, it actually gave a list of different formative and summative assessments to consider um, for the learner objective evaluating AI outputs for credibility and reliability. And then I've also, because of my class, I prefer students not to come to class, say hello. Students get a point for participation and being present, but if they need to miss class, there's a makeup attendance assignment that they can do, and it varies just depending on what that class is covering. For this particular class, I just uploaded the PowerPoint slides to ChatGPT and asked it to create a quiz. And from that quiz, I actually ended up using 7 of the 10 questions. And also I use AI for creating images, like the image on the first slide for this presentation was created using Midjourney. And although Midjourney has changed a little bit, it is a paid product. And I was able to get the library to pay for it. But it's evolved over time. Although the creating images has improved in regards to including text, it used to be if you asked it to include any text, it would just be gobbledygook. But you can even see in the example, the second row, where I was just a real quick prompt, image to put on a flyer for the webinar, Atoners of Web of Science, Accesses the Spice of STEM Life. If you look at the text, you can see alternative she got to use. Even though the generative AI from an image creation standpoint is improved, it still isn't perfect. And another tool that I use is Adobe Firefly. I don't know if that's still free, because there was a message that it had that was going to go to a paid product at the end of April. But then when I was getting a screen capture for this particular presentation, there was a mention that it was free. So I'm like, what are y'all doing, Adobe? But Firefly, again, its capabilities have evolved. And that's where sometimes the changes underneath the engine aren't always positive from a results standpoint. And then I forgot to add that I've created images using DALL-E. And then when DALL-E was sunsetted, and just you can create images from ChatGPT. But the problem there is that ChatGPT creates more simplistic images, almost, I wouldn't say cartoonish, but not necessarily realistic. And then there's other tools that I played with over time, but nothing that's really stuck more than that. But if I was to give you advice from my own experience with using a variety of AI tools, definitely determine your AI lane. Think about your job and what are your pain points? Because sometimes that's the easiest thing to do, is look at what do you find most egregious in your job that if someone else could do. And then look at, even consider where those things that you do where if you could find a time saver, have a time saver, because there's more than likely an AI tool out there that can help and assist. But also, the thing I also want to encourage you is make sure that you're using the right tool for a specific purpose. In the beginning, people were trying to search ChatGPT when it's an LLM for articles and books. And I'm like, that's not what I was about to do. And then when it was giving hallucinations, people were like, oh my God, it's giving hallucinations. And I'm like, it's not the tool to use in that manner. But just make sure that if you want to find articles, that you're using an AI tool that's going to give you articles. Or if you want to create an image, that you're using that tool that's going to allow you to create an image. If you're thinking about ideas, chatbots are great at, brainstorming. And there are even some other AI tools out there like HeyGen, not HeyGen, but HeyPi. HeyGen, actually, you can use a prompt you upload a 2-minute image of yourself, and you can use a prompt and it'll create a video. I haven't played with that one yet because I'm like, what are you gonna do with my image? But no, we'll talk about that later. But also spend time, experiment the tool. I know that all of our jobs are extremely busy, and it can be difficult to say, or to see where in my schedule can I fit anytime. But you'll be surprised. Sometimes it's in those down moments where I'll experiment with the AI tool. It'll be in the morning where I'm reading through my email and I'll get like an email from either a newsletter or blog post or an article that's talking about a particular AI tool. And I have 10 minutes. I'll just go and just play with it to see, okay, what is this all about? How does it actually work? Is it giving relevant results or et cetera, et cetera. But you definitely want to also be mindful of or plan, how are you going to keep up with those continuing changes? Because looking at the course that I taught, we started class mid-January and ended at the end of April. Perplexity changed 3 times during those 16 weeks, or was it more like 17 weeks, including spring break? But Insight change in terms of adding functionality to the assistant to resemble more what elicit used to be in terms of using a research question and getting a table of articles with how each of the articles are answering that particular research question. But yeah, you definitely wanted to realize that things are going to change. It's not going to be like Microsoft Office used to be when the software was coming out. It was each year. So like it was Office 95, 1998. In this case, those changes are happening, every couple of weeks, every month. So if you're doing a presentation or if you're teaching, you definitely want to make sure that you test it beforehand, so that if there are any changes that you're aware of what they are, versus being surprised when you're trying to demo a tool. But that was all I had. Any questions?
There were a couple in the chat that I think may have been addressed, but we'll just circle back really quick and touch on those briefly.
Please.
The first one was, how does the accuracy of elicit compare to other LLMs?
Oh, okay. So first case, Elicit isn't a large language model. It's really just an app. Think of it as a piece of software. In terms of accuracy, it's varied over time. Elicit has the ability to, from your research question, create a table where you can add columns to ask it to pull information from, literally, almost creating an annotated bibliography, but just in a tabular form. Well, annotated bibliography can be in a table. Initially, some of the information it was pulling when that first came out, it was better than hit or miss, but it wasn't perfect. And that has improved over time. So yeah, that's where you want to separate. And in terms of comparing it to other tools that allow you to find relevant research articles, that would be like your site, Consensus, SciSpace. I think it does a better job of giving you more relevant results for a research question. And also being an easier tool to onboard in terms of you're using natural language, you're just speaking to it and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and it's returning those results for you. Yeah, but definitely separate between what those tools that are chatbots and those tools that are really just software.
There are so many tools out there. I don't know how you keep up with all of them. So the other question that came through the chat, Jennifer asked a question and then another Jennifer gave an answer after, but I'll just ask you, can the citations that cite.ai give you be relied upon as being totally authentic?
Yeah, because Cite is actually pulling from the full text of articles. So again, that's where you want to really deep dive into how does this tool work, and where is it pulling the content from. So for Cite, it actually text mines the full text of articles, and it's pulling art. It has preprints, full text articles from publishers, and on their website you can see a list of the number of articles that they've actually text mined. But even if you wanted like a list of the journals that are included in site, there's a web page that you can go to pull that information. So yeah, you can, yeah. But wait, but there's a caveat. So if you're using main site to search for papers, we're good, we're golden. If you're using Site Assistant, I tell people don't copy and paste the text it gives you into an article, an assignment. Don't do that, because there have been some instances where it'll have an inline citation in Site Assistant that the information that it's pulling from may not necessarily be from that article. So that's where, and I couldn't give you a percentage on that in terms of it's 80% correct, because I be quite honest with you, I haven't gone through, and that's not the detailed dive in terms of research that I've been doing with site. But yeah, that's the one caveat that I would give in terms of Site Assistant and looking at the inline citations.
Nice, thanks. And I'll let Susan jump in now with the Q&A questions. You're muted, Susan. Oh, still muted. I'll pose the first question to you then. So interested by Claude. Does Claude give reasoning for its codes or address subjectivity like I would have to do when coding qualitative data as a solo researcher?
Yeah, it actually gave reasoning for the codes for the qualitative data. I always mix up qualitative and quantitative, and I have to think quantity. Yeah, so Claude, the one thing with Claude chat, most of the chatbots, with the exception of Grok, they typically will give an explanation of, this is what I analyzed, this is what I found, and this is why, this is what I did. And even when I was querying Claude to say, hey, that's not the number of results in the file, and it would come back, and I would ask, sometimes it would ask for clarification. So a change that I would probably do in the future, if I was asking Claude to code any qualitative data, is I would probably specify, be more specific rather than just say code the data. I would probably say this is what I found in initial inquiry. I'm identifying X as A, Y as B, but the more guidance you can give it, the more accurate it will be. So it's almost like giving someone instructions to code. But yeah, but Claude does give reasoning for it.
And the next question from Kristen was, a lot of tools out there like Elicit or Semantic Scholar are heavy on the hard sciences. Do you know of an AI research tool that is better for the humanities and arts?
I've actually used Elicit for STEM and non-STEM topics. Because here at Wake, we're a liberal arts college. So Pro Humanitate is our motto. So I've had to research topics that are outside of STEM. And Scite does a pretty good job because it's getting a lot of data from a variety of different places. But Semantic Scholar is, leans toward STEM. But Research Rabbit is a really good tool that I would recommend. Litmaps, Connected Papers, Insightful is the bomb. Insightful.xyz. I will, yeah. All day, every day. Yeah.
Great.
Those are ones that
I had never heard of that tool before today, so now I know.
Oh my God. You make me want to stop the presentation and show you.
I'll check it out. I'll check it out.
Okay, okay.
All right, another question is, I'm thinking of holding a couple workshops that will function as labs for students to test AI tools. Any guidance about offering something like this? Have you done anything similar? And sorry if I missed this in your very informative presentation.
No, it's all good. The reason why I'm like, oh, the class that I taught, it was integrating AI into the research process. And in that class, I actually was introducing students to different tools that they could use literally for each part of the research process. So from the start, when they're looking at what am I going to research, developing a research strategy, finding resources, et cetera, et cetera. The guidance that I would give you is to remember that even though students today are digital natives, we expect them to be technically competent. Please do not make that assumption. In my class, I had students from freshmen to seniors, graduating seniors. Um, Not a lot of them had used AI tools before. And if they had used it really surface. So keep in mind that you're going to be teaching novices. There may be a couple cases if you're explaining a number of steps that you may actually want to create a job aid or a guide step by step with screen captures for them to follow you. Um, uh, yeah. So the first thing I would suggest doing is asking from the top, what is your experience with AI tools? Have you used it in the past? How comfortable are you with technology? Because one of the things I'm noticing that I haven't I can't definitively say there's a difference with students that use a Mac computer over a PC in terms of um, navigating the graphical user interface of different AI tools. Um, but there may be some times that you may want to explain, especially if they're like sharing a chat. The difference between a URL, a permanent link. The more that I'm teaching individuals about AI tools, the more that I'm realizing that to not take anything for granted in terms of what their prior knowledge is, but to ask for it and then teach to where they are. Um, so like, for instance, for one of the one-shots that I do for one of the engineering class, transport phenomena, the first thing I do is I'll get a list of the names of the students from the instructor. It's a sophomore level course. So I'll ask each of the students, what's the engineering system that you're going to be researching? And what's your experience with Primo, our library discovery interface, engineering workbench, SciFinder, and Web of Science? Are you a novice, an expert, or somewhere in between? And that lets me know what point where I'm going to start that instruction from. And what examples I'm going to do. Literally, I teach that class. It's on the fly, just dependent on what students are in the class and what their experience is using different databases and tools. So yeah, definitely think about what are the learning objectives that you have for the students. Is it an introductory course just to get them familiar with AI tools and what they can do with them? Are you going to be more nuanced, more direct in the sense of using AI to find scholarly articles, but definitely have a sense of what learning objectives, what's the outcome that you want to achieve, and just make sure that you get an understanding of the students in that particular workshop and their experiences with AI.
Thank you. I love your energy around all of these tools. I feel like I would be a little bit exhausted trying to learn all of them and stay up to date, and you must have to update all of this work each semester.
Now remember, this is over 4.5, almost 5 years. So, but now, because like they're different. When I first started dipping a toe in the AI waters, there are individuals on Twitter, Instagram that I follow also there are newsletters that go out, like the Neuron. Yeah, the Neuron, where individuals are, testing different AI tools and be like, "Ooh, this is the new one." Not that I read every single one that comes out Monday through Friday, but there's sometimes I'll see one and be like, "Oh, okay, let me go test this." So it's just a matter of, but my lanes are research and instruction and productivity. So like I've even used AI to write letters of recommendations for friends of mine. It's made it so much easier. Because there's sometimes I have a mind for this is what I want to say, and trying to get it out is just not happening. There are times that my brain wants to write, and there's sometimes my brain wants to read. So it just all depends. And I can't force it to write when it wants to read. So there's where I'm sort of kind of guiding my brain into that area. But yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a matter of really thinking about what are those things that you want to learn and how you want to learn them. There have been different conferences that I've attended that are pretty good at giving an overview, like Teaching and Learning AI, that's down in Orlando. Um, the Generative Gale Conference, Generative AI in Libraries. Um, but yeah, not to say that there aren't going to be times where someone has, this is my title of my, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. What you said you're going to say. That's why I was trying to make sure that whatever I said I was going to say in a presentation that I actually do. But yeah. But the funniest thing is I've actually learned more sometimes just in that old adage of you know what you know when you teach it to someone. So in giving webinars and doing one shots, the different questions that people ask sometimes, will query a thought process that I'll go and I'll deep dive and research afterwards. And even going through like, okay, never do what I did. Okay, yes, I wrote 3 book chapters last year in the span of 7 months. Don't do that. But one was really easy because it was just based off my experience with my journey with AI. One was not as easy, but it was looking at again integrating AI into the STEM research process. But then the third, looking at AI in academic libraries, that was a deep dive. But I learned so much in doing that research in order to write that book chapter. So sometimes as librarians, we can get used to, showing someone this is how you do research, but there's a lot that you don't understand until you yourself are doing it. So I would say whatever tool that you want to demo or you want to use, make sure that you've used it before in the way that you're going to teach it. Because that gives you that experience to be like, okay, this is not going to give you what you want. Like I've been playing with deep research from ChatGPT, Consensus, and I'm like, this is not. No. Because I noticed it has issues with any historical information or data. So like I was trying to get like an overview of how AI has been used in academic libraries from its inception. No. um, and people talk about deep research taking over academia. I'm like, not right now. But yeah, because the thing you always have to keep in mind is that not all of these tools, again, have access to every single article that's been published or every single book. And realizing that a number of articles are still behind a paywall. So unless someone's going to raise their hand and say that I've used paywall articles without permission, because there's only a few companies that have actually paid for, like Taylor and Francis sold, I forget what they sold into off the top of my brain, but yeah. So for some areas of research or topics that most of the content is behind a paywall, it's going to be very surface and what it gives you. And even though open access is huge in Europe, it's not as much so in the US, although so there's still a number of articles, unless the actual researcher is really, focused on publishing OA. Their work more than likely is behind a paywall and not publicly available to everyone or accessible to everyone. So that's always what you need to keep in mind, is knowing where whatever tool you're using is pulling the information from. Like Insightful is pulling from OpenAlex, Semantic Scholar, Crossref. There's a fourth one that I don't remember off the top of my head. But there are some tools that only are pulling from Semantic Scholar, and Semantic Scholars, it's not that it's limited. It does have, a number of millions of articles, but when you compare it to like lens.org, Google Scholar, I think even dimensions.ai has more. So that's where you want to look at, is this article giving me or is this AI tool giving me the necessary depth and breadth? Because some do a really good job of giving you service information, but not necessarily in-depth information. So that's what I try to tell students. Never look at what it's giving you as the gospel truth. You're still going to need to do the work. We're not at Jarvis 2.0. If you're an Ironman enthusiast, yeah, we're not there yet.
Well, thank you, Denice, for such a great overview of all these resources.
You are totally and always welcome.
Thank you so much. This was such a great array of resources that I was not familiar with before, so I really appreciate you sharing them and taking the time to do that today. I want to thank everyone for attending this session. We'll be taking a break now until 2:15 when we reconvene for our next session, AI and the Future of Work. Thank you so much.